The illusion of identity. Most people go through life believing that they already know who they are. They define themselves by their name, their job, their culture, their past experiences. But what if I told you that your identity is far more complex than you realize? That the self you believe yourself to be is only a surface-level construct, a fraction of a much deeper, more profound reality. Carl Jung believed that within every individual there exists a hidden world, a vast and intricate inner landscape filled with forgotten memories, suppressed emotions, unacknowledged desires, and untapped potential. And the key to truly finding yourself is not in constructing a brand new identity, but in uncovering what has been buried within you all along. Pause for a moment. Have you ever felt a deep, unexplainable longing for something more? A sense that there is a greater version of yourself waiting to emerge? That is not just imagination. It is the voice of your unconscious mind, calling you to something greater. Jung referred to this process as individuation. He believed that true fulfillment comes not from conforming to external expectations, but from integrating every aspect of who we are, the light, the dark, the known, and the hidden. Yet here is the paradox. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned to forget. We are given names, roles, labels. We are told what is acceptable and what is not. We are rewarded when we fit in and punished when we step out of line. Slowly, we learn to tuck away the parts of ourselves that don't match the expectations. We build a mask that Jung called the persona. The persona is useful. It helps us survive in society. It helps us navigate relationships. It even helps us succeed in careers. But here's the problem. The more we identify with the mask, the more we forget the face behind it. Think back to your childhood. Were there times when you expressed yourself freely only to be told you were too much, too loud, too sensitive, too dreamy, too rebellious? Each correction, each dismissal was like a quiet instruction. Hide that part of yourself. So you did. Piece by piece, you hid your spontaneity, your creativity, your raw emotions, until one day you looked in the mirror and saw only the mask staring back. This is why so many people feel empty even when they appear successful, because they are not living as themselves. They are living as the persona. And yet, beneath the mask, something still stirs, a restless energy, a quiet whisper that says, there is more. This whisper is the unconscious. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply waits for us to listen. But most people never do. They drown it out with distractions, work, entertainment, endless scrolling. They fear silence, because in silence, the whisper grows louder, and so they keep running. But what they don't realize is this. The more you run from the unconscious, the more it runs your life. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think about that. How many of your choices were truly yours, and how many were patterns, shaped by wounds you never healed, fears you never faced, desires you never admitted? This is the illusion of identity. We think we know who we are, but so much of what we call me is conditioning, repetition, and survival. True life, Jung said, doesn't begin until you find yourself. And finding yourself requires something most people avoid, a confrontation with the shadow. So, in this journey, we are going to peel back the mask. We are going to step beyond the persona and descend into the deeper layers of the psyche. It will not always be comfortable, but it will always be worth it. Because beyond the illusion of identity lies your true self. And this brings us to the next part of our journey. If the persona is the mask we show the world, what happens to the parts of ourselves we hide? Where do they go? And what happens when they refuse to stay buried? In part 2, we will step into the realm of the shadow, the hidden side of the self, and the key to unlocking your authenticity. Part 2. The Shadow and the Suppressed Self. If the persona is the mask we present to the world, then the shadow is what we hide behind it. The shadow is not a monster from outside, it is born from within. It contains everything we were told was unacceptable. Our anger, our jealousy, our wild desires, even our tenderness when the world demanded toughness, even our creativity when the world demanded practicality. Every time you were told, don't be so sensitive. Every time you were told, grow up. Don't cry. Don't dream too big. A piece of you was pushed into the shadow. And here is the great mistake. We think that by hiding these parts, they disappear. But they do not vanish. They sink into the unconscious, where they continue to live, to breathe, to act, without our awareness. Have you ever disliked someone intensely without knowing why? Or been triggered by a behavior that seemed small, yet provoked a storm inside you? This is often the shadow at work. Jung explained that the qualities we repress in ourselves are projected outward. When we cannot face our own anger, we see it in others. When we cannot admit our own vulnerability, we despise it in others. The shadow doesn't go away. It uses the world as its mirror. Pause for a moment. Think of a person who irritates you more than anyone else. Now ask yourself, what exactly is it about them that bothers you? And then ask the harder question, could that very quality also live in me? This is the uncomfortable doorway to shadow work. But here's the paradox. The shadow is not only darkness, it also contains light, hidden strengths, suppressed talents, the passions you buried to fit in. Maybe you were told as a child that art was useless, so you abandoned your creativity. Maybe you were told to be strong, so you buried your softness. Maybe you were told not to shine too brightly, so you hid your brilliance. All of that went into the shadow. Which means the shadow is not just the place of your shame, it is also the storage of your power. Carl Jung said, "The gold is in the dark." And what he meant is this: if you are willing to enter the shadow, you will find not only your wounds but your treasures. But most people never make this journey, because facing the shadow feels like death. It means admitting you are not only the good person you pretend to be, it means acknowledging you are capable of anger, envy, selfishness, cruelty. It means holding the mirror steady even when you want to look away. And yet, without this confrontation, you will never be whole. Think of it like this. If you try to live only as light, you live half a life. The unacknowledged shadow leaks out sideways, in passive-aggressive comments, in addictions, in self-sabotage, in the patterns you keep repeating without knowing why. The shadow you refuse to face becomes the fate you cannot escape. So how do we begin? The first step is recognition. Notice your triggers. Notice the qualities in others that provoke you the most. Notice the emotions you dismiss with phrases like, "I don't care," or "I'm fine." Because often beneath those words, the shadow is screaming, "Look at me." The second step is compassion. The shadow cannot be beaten into submission. It must be met like a child who has been locked away too long, with patience, with honesty, with care. Sit with your anger and ask, what are you protecting? Sit with your jealousy and ask, what are you longing for? Sit with your fear and ask, what do you need to feel safe? These emotions, when heard, lose their destructive grip. They transform from enemies into guides. And then comes the third step, integration. Integration means you stop saying, "That's not me." You start saying, "That is also me. I am kind and sometimes cruel. I am strong and sometimes fragile. I am loving and sometimes afraid." When you accept the whole, you stop being controlled by the hidden parts. Instead, you begin to live as one unified self. So I want you to reflect now. What is one part of yourself you've always pushed away? Your sensitivity, your ambition, your anger, your tenderness? What if instead of banishing it, you invited it to the table? What might it teach you? What power might it restore to you? Take a moment after this episode. Write one sentence beginning with, "The part of me I am ready to reclaim is..." That one sentence could begin a lifetime of healing. This is the work Jung called individuation, not becoming perfect, not becoming someone else, but becoming whole by uniting the persona and the shadow. Because the truth is, life does not begin when you hide your darkness. Life begins when you reclaim it. In part 1, we unmasked the illusion of identity. In part 2, we stepped into the realm of the shadow. And now, we must ask, how does the unconscious actually speak to us? How does it call us back to the parts we have buried? In part 3, we will explore the language of the unconscious, dreams, symbols, and synchronicities, and how they guide you toward the self you were always meant to be. Part 3, the call of the unconscious. When we leave the shadow unacknowledged, it does not simply wait patiently in the dark. It finds ways to speak. It slips messages into our lives, subtle, symbolic, sometimes disruptive. Carl Jung called this the language of the unconscious, and the unconscious speaks in 3 great dialects: dreams, symbols, and synchronicities. Let us begin with dreams. Dreams are the nightly theater of the soul. They are not random nonsense, as some might believe. They are carefully staged plays, designed by your unconscious to reveal what your waking mind refuses to see. Think of the last vivid dream you had. Perhaps you were being chased. Perhaps you were standing on a stage unprepared. Perhaps you saw a strange animal, or an old house, or a forgotten lover. At first you may shrug it off, but Jung would ask, what does the dream reveal about what you've hidden? If you are chased, what are you running from in waking life? If you stand exposed, what part of you fears being truly seen? If the animal appears, what instinct have you abandoned? If the house appears, what memory remains unvisited? Dreams are the soul's attempt to balance the psyche. They show us what we lack, what we avoid, what we must reclaim. And then there are symbols. The unconscious does not speak in neat sentences. It speaks in images, patterns, archetypes. A serpent, a circle, a river, a flame. Each one is not literal, but symbolic. The serpent might mean danger, or it might mean renewal, shedding an old skin. The circle might mean limitation, or it might mean eternity, wholeness. The river might mean the flow of life, or the current that carries you where you resist going. Symbols appear not only in dreams but in art, in stories, in sudden images that rise unbidden in your imagination. They are the shorthand of the unconscious. When words fail, symbols emerge. Jung saw this everywhere, in myths, in religions, in fairy tales. Across cultures, across centuries, humans have told the same stories with different costumes. Why? Because they are not just stories, they are maps of the psyche, and the unconscious keeps using them to guide us. And then there is the most mysterious language of all, synchronicity. Synchronicity is the meaningful coincidence. It is when the outer world aligns with the inner world, when something happens outside that mirrors exactly what is happening inside. You think of an old friend, and they call you that very day. You wrestle silently with a decision, and you pass a billboard with a single word that seems to answer you. You feel lost, and a stranger speaks a sentence that pierces your heart like it was meant only for you. Skeptics call it chance. Jung called it evidence of a deeper order, and a causal connection that links psyche and matter. For him, synchronicity was not superstition. It was proof that the unconscious is not locked inside your skull. It interacts with the world around you. Synchronicity is the universe tapping you on the shoulder. It whispers, "Pay attention. You are on the path." Think back. Have you ever had a moment so uncanny that you could not explain it away? A coincidence that felt alive, charged with meaning. That was not random. That was your unconscious reaching into the fabric of reality to speak to you. Pause here and reflect. What synchronicity has marked your life recently? Type it in the comments. Share it. You may discover that others too are hearing the same mysterious language. So, what are we to do with these messages, dreams, symbols, synchronicities? The first step is to notice. Write down your dreams as soon as you wake. Sketch the symbol that won't leave your mind. Record the coincidences that make your heart leap. The second step is to reflect. Ask not, what does this mean universally, but what does this mean to me? A river in your dream may not mean the same as a river in mine. The unconscious is personal, even when it uses collective images. The third step is to dialogue. Treat the dream figure as if it were a person. Speak to the symbol as if it had a voice. Ask the synchronicity, what are you asking of me? And listen, not with logic, but with intuition. The unconscious is not trying to confuse you. It is trying to wake you. Now consider this. Most people ignore the call. They laugh off their dreams. They dismiss symbols as just imagination. They reduce synchronicity to coincidence. And so the unconscious grows louder. Ignored dreams turn into nightmares. Dismissed symbols turn into symptoms. Neglected synchronicities turn into crises. The unconscious will speak. The only choice you have is whether to listen early or late. Carl Jung believed that by paying attention to these messages, we begin to align with the deeper self. We begin to see that life is not random, that our wounds, our longings, even our accidents are not meaningless. They are invitations, invitations to become who we truly are. So ask yourself now, what has your unconscious been trying to tell you? What dream repeats itself? What image keeps returning? What coincidence keeps showing up in your life? Write it down. Whisper it aloud. That message is the key you've been ignoring. We began this journey with the illusion of identity. Then we faced the shadow, the parts we reject. Now we've listened to the call of the unconscious, its dreams, symbols, synchronicities. But what do we do with all of this? How do we bring these fragments together? How do we walk the path Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole? That is where we go next. In part 4, we will explore individuation, becoming whole. The step-by-step process of integrating the persona, the shadow, the anima and animus, until you live not as fragments, but as a unified self. Part 4. Individuation, becoming whole. We have spoken of the persona, the shadow, and the subtle language of the unconscious, dreams, symbols, and synchronicities. But now the question is, how do we bring all these pieces together? How do we move from fragments to wholeness? Carl Jung called this process individuation. It is the journey of becoming who you truly are, by integrating every part of yourself, both light and dark, both conscious and unconscious. Let's be clear. Individuation is not about perfection. It is not about becoming flawless, pure, or saintly. It is about wholeness. It is about holding the opposites inside you without tearing apart. You are strong and you are weak. You are loving and you are selfish. You are courageous and you are afraid. Individuation means saying, yes, all of this is me. Think of your psyche as a house. For years you have only lived in the front room, the persona, the mask you show to the world. But the house has many rooms. Some you have locked and forgotten. Some you have never even entered. Individuation is the process of walking through the house with a lamp, opening each door and saying, I will live here too. When you light every room, the house becomes a home. That is wholeness. But individuation is not only about the shadow. Jung also spoke of deeper archetypes within, the anima and animus, the inner other. He observed that within every man lives a hidden feminine side, the anima, and within every woman lives a hidden masculine side, the animus. These are not about gender roles. They are about balance. The anima carries emotion, intuition, creativity, connection to the unconscious. The animus carries logic, structure, discipline, assertiveness. Both are necessary for wholeness. But here's the tragedy. Most people exile one of them. A man who rejects his anima fears vulnerability, mocks tenderness, hides emotion. A woman who rejects her animus fears authority, avoids power, silences her voice, and so they remain incomplete. Individuation requires reconciliation. A man must embrace his softness, his intuitive depths. A woman must embrace her authority, her right to lead. Only then do they become whole, not because they balance masculinity and femininity as society defines them, but because they integrate the full spectrum of human potential. Pause here. Reflect on yourself. Have you exiled the inner other? If you are a man, do you struggle to cry, to admit need, to feel? If you are a woman, do you hesitate to speak, to act, to take up space? These are invitations. The anima and animus are not enemies. They are missing halves of your soul. Individuation also requires confronting archetypes, the universal forces within us, the hero, the victim. The wise old man, the trickster, these are not just stories in myths, they live in you. When you act with courage, you awaken the hero. When you feel small and powerless, you feel the victim. When you guide others with wisdom, the sage speaks through you. When you sabotage yourself with jokes or distractions, the trickster plays its part. The task is not to eliminate them, it is to know them, to see when they are at work, to let them serve you instead of control you. So what does individuation feel like day to day? It feels like alignment. It feels like speaking with your own voice, not the voice of your parents, your culture, your fears. It feels like making choices not out of obligation, but out of truth. It feels like carrying contradictions without shame. Individuation is not a destination you achieve. It is a process, a lifelong unfolding. Every dream, every conflict, every relationship becomes an opportunity to integrate. Here is a practical truth. Individuation is rarely comfortable, because each step requires letting something die. The mask must die so the face can live. The denial must die so the shadow can be embraced. The rigid roles must die so the inner other can breathe. This death is painful. You may lose relationships, you may leave jobs, you may outgrow versions of yourself that once felt safe. But what is born is far greater, the self. Jung distinguished between the ego and the self. The ego is the small I, the story you tell about who you are. The self is the totality, the vast center that holds all opposites. The self is not an idea. It is an experience. When you feel rooted, authentic, whole. Think of a tree. The ego is the branches, visible, reaching, striving. The self is the roots, deep, unseen, but essential. When the branches break, the roots remain. When storms come, the tree survives because of the roots. That is what individuation offers. Roots. So let me ask you directly, where in your life are you still living as a mask? What part of yourself have you refused to integrate? And what would it mean to embrace the fullness of who you are? Not perfect, not polished, but whole. Pause here. Write one sentence beginning with, "If I were whole, I would." This small act of imagination plants a seed. We began this journey with the illusion of identity. Then we faced the shadow. Then we listened to the language of the unconscious. And now we have stepped into individuation, the art of becoming whole. But individuation is not a straight path. There are obstacles, fear, avoidance, ego resistance, and unless we face them, the process will stall. In part 5, we will explore the obstacles to wholeness, why so many resist shadow work, why the ego clings to old patterns, and how to walk through fear into freedom. As part 5, the obstacles to wholeness. We have seen what individuation asks of us: to take off the mask of the persona, to welcome the shadow, to listen to the unconscious, to balance the anima and the animus, to live as a whole, integrated self. But if this is the path to freedom, why do so few walk it? Why do so many stop halfway, choosing illusion over authenticity? Carl Jung was clear. The path to wholeness is not blocked by lack of knowledge. It is blocked by fear, by the resistance of the ego, by the endless distractions we create to avoid the truth. Let us begin with fear. Fear is the first gatekeeper. It whispers, "Don't go further. If you face what is inside, you will not survive." Fear arises because individuation feels like death. To the ego, it is death. The ego has built its identity on masks, habits, stories. When you begin to take those apart, the ego panics. Imagine you've lived your whole life wearing armor. The armor is heavy, uncomfortable, but familiar. Now someone asks you to take it off and walk naked into the unknown. Of course you tremble. Of course you resist. Fear is not proof you are on the wrong path. Fear is proof you are on the right one. The question is not, how do I get rid of fear? The question is, am I willing to walk with fear? The second obstacle is the ego. The ego is not your enemy. It is necessary. It gives you a sense of I. It organizes your life. But the ego wants control, and individuation asks the ego to surrender. This is why Jung often saw midlife crises as moments of opportunity. In the first half of life, the ego builds career, family, identity, but eventually cracks appear. The achievements feel hollow. The roles feel confining. The soul whispers, "Is this all there is?" At that point, the ego resists. It doubles down, chasing more success, more possessions, more distractions. But the deeper self will not be silenced. And so tension grows between the ego and the self. This tension is not a mistake. It is the very pressure that births transformation. But most people side with the ego. They cling to comfort, to control, to certainty, and in doing so, they stop the process of individuation. The third obstacle is avoidance. Even if we know the path, even if we feel the call, we find ways to avoid it. We scroll endlessly on our phones. We bury ourselves in work. We keep the music loud, the schedule full, the nights busy, because silence is dangerous. In silence, the unconscious speaks, and we are afraid to hear it. Avoidance is seductive because it works, temporarily. It numbs the pain, it delays the confrontation. But the unconscious is patient. It will return in other forms: anxiety, depression, failed relationships, physical symptoms. The parts we avoid do not disappear, they wait. So, what can we do? How do we move past these obstacles? The answer is not force, it is awareness. When fear arises, acknowledge it. Say, "Fear is here because something in me is dying." That is natural. That is necessary. When the ego resists, smile gently. Say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but now I need to listen to something deeper." When avoidance tempts you, pause. Turn off the noise for just 5 minutes. Sit in silence. Breathe. The unconscious does not need hours, it only needs attention. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. This pain is the price of entry, but pain is not punishment, it is birth." Think of a seed breaking open. From the outside, it looks like destruction. From the inside, it is transformation. The shell must crack for the life within to emerge. You too must crack. The mask must shatter. The shadow must surface. The ego must loosen. Only then can the self emerge. Pause here. Reflect. Where in your life are you avoiding the crack? Where are you holding on to a mask, an identity, a role, because you fear what might happen if you let go? Write one sentence beginning with, "The fear I am ready to face is..." That single admission could be the first crack that lets in the light. So far, we have exposed the obstacles: fear, ego, avoidance. But here is the deeper truth. The very obstacles you fear hold the medicine you need. Your fear points to where life is asking you to grow. Your ego, when balanced, can become a loyal servant of the self. Your avoidance shows you exactly what is most important. The obstacle is not in the way. The obstacle is the way. In Part 4, we explored individuation as the path to wholeness. In Part 5, we have seen why so many resist it. Now, in Part 6, we will enter the heart of the transformation, the gift of integration. What happens when you truly embrace the shadow, balance the inner opposites, and allow the self to emerge? This is where the pain turns into power and the fragments become a living, breathing whole. Part 6. The gift of integration. We have walked through the persona and the shadow. We have listened to the whispers of the unconscious. We have entered individuation and faced the obstacles of fear, ego, and avoidance. Now comes the question: what happens when we integrate? What happens when we stop hiding, stop running, and finally allow every part of ourselves to belong? Carl Jung taught that the goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness. And wholeness comes through integration. Integration means this: the parts you once rejected no longer work against you. They work with you. Your anger no longer explodes or poisons. It becomes clarity, strength, the courage to defend what matters. Your fear no longer paralyzes. It becomes alertness, wisdom, the reminder to move carefully when danger is real. Your grief no longer drowns you. It becomes tenderness, compassion, the ability to feel the suffering of others. Integration turns enemies into allies. It transforms the scattered voices inside into a choir that sings in harmony. Think of gold. In alchemy, the ancient art Jung loved, gold is not found ready-made. It is created by purifying, burning, dissolving, combining. The base metal must endure fire to become something precious. So it is with the psyche. Integration is the alchemy of the soul. The shadow is the base material. Your consciousness is the fire, and wholeness is the gold. This is why Jung said, "The gold is in the dark," because only by entering the shadow can we find the treasure hidden there. But integration is not only internal, it changes how you live in the world. When you integrate, you stop needing to wear masks. You speak more simply, more honestly. You no longer waste energy pretending. When you integrate, you stop projecting so much onto others. You don't need to demonize them because you know your own darkness. You don't need to idolize them because you've reclaimed your own power. When you integrate, relationships become clearer. You can love without clinging. You can forgive without excusing. You can walk away without hatred. Integration is freedom, not because life gets easier, but because you no longer betray yourself to survive it. Pause for a moment. Imagine how your life would change if you accepted every part of yourself. Not just the good parts, not just the polished parts, but the awkward, the wounded, the afraid, the wild. What energy would return to you if you no longer wasted it on hiding? What joy would surface if you no longer carried shame? What love would flow if you no longer feared being truly seen? Write one sentence beginning with, "If I embraced all of me, I would." That sentence is a doorway. Jung saw integration as more than psychology. He saw it as spiritual. Because the self, the center that emerges through individuation, is larger than the ego. It is not just your little story. It is connected to the collective unconscious, to the great web of life. When you integrate, you realize you are not separate. Your healing is not only yours, it ripples outward. Your wholeness helps others remember theirs. Your authenticity gives others permission to drop their masks. This is why shadow work matters. Not just for you, but for the world. And here is the final gift: peace. Peace does not mean the absence of conflict. It means you are no longer at war with yourself. You can sit in silence and not feel haunted. You can face challenge without splitting in two. You can walk through the world rooted in your own center. This peace is not fragile, it is resilient, because it is built on truth. So what is the gift of integration? It is freedom from illusion. It is the return of your power. It is the discovery that the life you thought you had to chase was always within you. Carl Jung wrote, "I'd rather be whole than good, because being good often means conforming to what others want, but being whole means living as who you truly are, and that is the greatest gift of all." So far, we have uncovered the illusion of identity, faced the shadow, heard the unconscious, stepped into individuation, endured the obstacles, and discovered the gift of integration. But the journey is not over. Because now the question is, what next? How do we live this wholeness in daily life? How do we carry it into relationships, work, love, creativity, community? In part 7, we will close our journey with living the wholeness, a reflection on how to embody the self in everyday life, and an invitation to continue this path together. Part 7, Living the Wholeness. We have traveled far together. From the illusion of identity to the mask of the persona, from the shadow we try to bury, to the dreams, symbols, and synchronicities of the unconscious, from individuation and its obstacles to the gift of integration. Now comes the final question. How do we live this wholeness, here and now? Living wholeness does not mean you will never struggle again. It does not mean you will never feel anger, fear, doubt, or pain. It means you will meet them differently. When anger comes, you pause and listen to its wisdom. When fear comes, you bow and walk with it instead of running. When grief comes, you let it wash through you, knowing it is proof of love. When joy comes, you do not cling. You simply savor. Wholeness is not about control. It is about relationship with every part of yourself. So, how do you practice this in daily life? First, cultivate silence. 5 minutes of stillness a day, no distractions. In silence, the unconscious speaks. Second, honor your dreams. Keep a notebook by your bed. Write the images that come. Treat them as letters from your deeper self. Third, watch for synchronicities. When the outer world mirrors your inner world, pay attention. Ask, what is life trying to tell me? Fourth, embrace contradictions. When you catch yourself thinking, I can't be both this and that, remind yourself, wholeness means I can. And finally, practice compassion, not just for others, but for yourself, especially for the parts you once rejected. Pause and imagine a life where you are no longer hiding, a life where your work, your love, your friendships, your art, all flow from your true center. What would that feel like? Write it down. Whisper it aloud. That vision is not a fantasy. It is a possibility. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege is now yours. But here is the truth. The journey never ends. Individuation is a lifelong unfolding. Every year, every season, life will show you new layers of shadow to embrace, new archetypes to meet, new treasures to uncover. Do not resist this. Walk with it. This is the path of becoming whole. So I leave you with this invitation. Reflect on your shadow. Listen to your unconscious. Seek wholeness, not perfection, and then share your truth. Right now, in the comments, write this sentence. My soul is trying to tell me that. Finish it with the words that rise up in you. Your sentence may be the mirror someone else desperately needs. If this journey spoke to you, don't walk it alone. Subscribe to Inner Balance Psychology. Here, we dive deep into Jung's wisdom, shadow work, individuation, archetypes, the Red Book, and together we create a space for authenticity, healing, and transformation. Because this is not just Jung's story, it is not just my story. It is your story, and the question is not, are you ready to begin? The question is, will you dare to continue? The shadow is waiting. The light is waiting. You are waiting. Step in.